talk show host, Renegade Reason, Gary Varner.
So the live stream is up.
And so for next time, you'll have that the voiceover, right? From
I just got to download it back onto the computer. Sorry, I set up a live stream, so now I got to turn on Talk Radio real quick.
Your show will go live in seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. Blog Talk Radio.
You're about to hear a revolution in talk radio. Liberty Talk Radio, where the critical thinking will defrag your mind of propaganda-ridden viruses induced by mass media news programming. No BS here, just the facts. And now we present to you America's quintessential iconoclastic anomaly. Wow. In talk radio, your host, Joe Cristiano.
Welcome, everyone, to Liberty Talk Radio, America's libertarian voice, broadcasting from our studio in Tulsa, Oklahoma, to around the world. I'm your host, Joe Cristiano, and this is your antidote to popular talk radio. Folks, it's time for us to take back control of our government now before this bureaucratic, oversized, and self-serving federal government starves us of our property, our freedom, our rights, and our liberty. But to do this, we must shed conventional thinking regarding our political structure. We need to be revolutionaries in thought, dissidents in action. Only after we recognize what our government is doing to our freedom and our Constitution will we start taking it back. And this program is just about that. Today we're pleased to have as our guest the talk show host for Renegade Reason, Gary Varner. Gary would like to talk about the dangers of the right-left paradigm that we hear in ad nauseum, on the television, on mainstream television, and either they take one side or the other. And quite frankly, I think both sides are wrong. But let's see what Gary has to say. Gary, welcome to Liberty Talk Radio.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
All right. Now, what do you mean by the dangers of the right-left paradigm, or the right-left, the right-left paradigm?
The problem with, partisan politics and things like that. Well, I mean, you've said it pretty much perfectly yourself a million times. I mean, it's basically you've got everybody so wrapped up in this kind of sports-like mentality. We don't actually look at issues. We don't look at, individual subjects like abortion or the wall or whatever for an actual individual topic. We look at it like teams, and we'll do complete 360s on positions for the name of our team. You know what I mean? So, for example, I got a video here from that shows Bill Clinton talking about how he wants to build a wall, and then Donald Trump talking about how he wants to build a wall.
All right, you want to play that now? Yeah. All right, let's play that now, folks. Let's listen in. If you're watching in, you can see this.
Is the problem of illegal immigration.
We have to stop the inflow of illegals coming into our country.
This administration has taken a strong stand to stiffen the protection of our borders.
We will build a wall. It will do what it's supposed to do. Keep illegal immigrants out.
We are increasing border controls by 50%.
We're going to have a border. It's going to be a real border. We have a country. We have to have borders.
We are increasing inspections to prevent the hiring of illegal immigrants. And tonight I announce I will sign an executive order to deny federal contracts to businesses that hire illegal immigrants.
What are we going to do about illegal hiring?
You can be very, very strong. It could be a huge financial penalty. It could be beyond a
What are these guys
penalty.
in your... Because that's the magnet.
That with E-Verify and with various
and are you for
methods.
it?
I'm for it.
We should honor every legal immigrant here working hard to be a good citizen, but we are also a nation of laws.
We have a country. We have to have laws. We either have a country or we don't.
So that's pretty much it, I mean, that sums it up right there. I mean, $20 says the Republicans at the time absolutely flipped out when Clinton said that. You know what I mean? But it's the same position. And that's part of the problem with the left and right paradigm, as you put it. So, yeah, that's what I mean.
Well, there's so much that I can take issue with everything that these guys said. He said, we are a nation of laws. Well, if we were a nation of laws, we wouldn't be doing 99% of what our government does.
Right.
Think about it. I mean, we can go down the list, and every time there is legislation that's passed, and I think Ron Paul talked about this just perfectly. They asked him, why didn't he vote for this legislation? I don't recall what it was. He said, because they gave me a 1,200-page document at 4 o'clock in the afternoon and said, we're voting on this 8 o'clock tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
He said, if I was given an entire year and had constitutional experts and attorneys with me, we couldn't unravel that in a year's time. He said, so I vote no. And that's why it's called Dr. No. But he was absolutely correct.
Right.
Now, if it was said something like, we'd like to declare war on Lithuania for no reason at all, vote yes or no, he would vote no and tell you why. He couldn't even, he says, I cannot tell you what is in that legislation, but neither can anyone else on the floor,
right,
Republican nor Democrat, can tell you what is in that legislation, even what it means or what it references to, but they will vote according to the left-right paradigm.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a real problem.
And was it that Nancy Pelosi said we have to, pass the bill so we can read it?
Oh, yes, so we know what's in it. I mean, now that talks to the mentality of the people that we have in office. Actually, when you really think about it, those people that we elect are not very bright. I mean, they're bright and they're schooled bright. In other words, that most of them, about 80%, are attorneys, which, first of all, should be your first tip. We have a problem, Houston.
Yeah, right.
Once you say 80%, right? Now, to pass the bar, you can't be stupid, but you could be ignorant. You've got to be very smart, but you could be ignorant of the law. I mean, of freedom, of the concept of freedom. You can be totally ignorant. You could have never read the Constitution, have no idea what the Constitution is, never seen it, have no idea what one word in the Constitution says, but pass the law exam. Right? When they get into office, they do know how to do one thing very well. Every one of them. They know how to follow the money. And let me give you an example. Isn't it strange, isn't it bizarre that marijuana is illegal?
Sure.
Right? That's bad enough. But now they say medical marijuana is illegal. Now, when you just look at that simple statement, it makes no sense.
Yeah.
I had a knee replacement about 4 years ago. In fact, the other one's going to be replaced hopefully this year. Very incredibly painful operation. And in fact, it is the most egregious, the most invasive operation you can have is when they actually cut your bones and put metal in its place. Let me tell you something, 6 weeks of pure hell.
Yeah.
Right? They started me with morphine. Right? I mean, pure morphine. I couldn't. I was sailing high, right?
Yeah.
And then I think they went to codeine for a while before I left the hospital. When I left the hospital, they put me on oxycodone, right? Oh, that got me sick. I stayed on it for about a week or so, and they converted me to hydrocodone. Right. And now that's almost as bad, but doesn't get you as sick. After about 5 or 6 weeks, I told my wife, I said, I'm still in pain. I'm going to endure the pain. I can't take it anymore. Now, just those 4 drugs that are horrible drugs, you wouldn't want to take them because they get you sick as a dog.
Yeah.
Now, they zone you out. I mean, you can't think of anything, right? They are legal, medically legal. They're not,
Well, it's because they can be regulated.
Yeah.
That's the whole point. You can't regulate a plant.
Yeah. So, but the thing is, what you can regulate is medical marijuana. You can say, all right, these
sort of, sure.
Well, I mean, we have drugs on the street. How many are regulated? None of them.
Yeah, but really, what's the fundamental difference between medical marijuana and just marijuana? It's a term.
Oh no, yeah, well, right. But my point is not that. My point is that they disallow medical marijuana because it's an illegal drug. Well, so is morphine, so is codeine, so is hydrocodone, so is oxycodone. All these drugs are illegal on the street. You need a doctor.
Yeah.
Now you say, well, why would they do that? It's illogical. And of course it's illogical if you have a half a brain cell working, unless you believe in the left-right paradigm and you say everything that your representative in your party says you agree with, regardless.
Sure.
The reason for it is that if they allowed medical marijuana, the pharmaceutical industry loses billions, with a B, billions of dollars in many drugs that are out there now that are costing a fortune to to not to make, but to sell, right? Because you can't say, well, marijuana is $500 a pill. You say, hey, Charlie down the street selling it for 50 cents. We know that. See, the people know the price of marijuana. They know that it's incredibly inexpensive, and even if a pharmaceutical firm processes it, let's say they go through special processing and purification process and put in tablets and pretty bottles and all that. So instead of it being, $10, it's $15,
Right.
But it's going to displace several drugs that are going for megabucks. So we are talking about millions, possibly billions of dollars that the pharmaceutical industry loses. Well, what does the pharmaceutical industry have to do with our Congress? Well, I go back to the premise that our Congress is made up of a bunch of attorneys, don't understand the Constitution, but they do know money. Follow the money in everything.
Right.
So the pharmaceutical industries puts hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars actually in all of the representatives and the Senate races and the presidential race, etc., right?
Yeah.
So when they do, and then it comes time to vote for medical marijuana, how do you think the person's going to vote? He's going to say, let's say the pharmaceutical, I got $400,000 for my campaign last year, and I have to run every 2 years. Every 2 years, because I'm a congressman, and that's another thing I want to talk about. But every 2 years, so I'm going to need $400,000 every 2 years. I better vote against it. So the people that are in office are as crooked. I mean, no, they're more crooked. Mm-hmm. They are more unethical than the person who is dealing in every illegal drug on the street. Because at least these guys say, what do you do? Yeah, I peddle crack. I mean, they're on.
Right.
They are doing something illegal, but they're honest about it. What we have in office is that we have people who are doing things that are illegal, and then they're dishonest about it. Give me the guy selling crack on the street above any politician that we have right now, with the exception of a few.
Right. Well, it's incredible when you think about the underlying logic of it, how inconsistent it is. One of the most famous conservatives, a person traditionally on the right, was Milton Friedman.
Right.
Milton Friedman was against the drug war. He said what it does is it creates a black market. In fact, I think it was, I'm going to get it wrong, I'm sure, but basically cocaine was so expensive, so they banned it and everything like that. That shot the price up, and so what they did to create a replacement for it was a more dangerous drug called crack.
Right.
And it's so not only does banning stuff create a black market, it creates more dangerous drugs.
Right.
Another example would be methamphetamine. You ban methamphetamine, they start snorting bath salts.
Right.
And so it creates this never-ending process. And what's even more incredible about it to me is when you talk to a conservative and you say the same general principle, but you apply it to guns. So, for example, why should we not ban guns? Well, because it creates a black market and it only benefits the criminals.
Right.
They get it. They get it when you talk about it in those terms.
Right.
But when you say, okay, well, why should we not ban marijuana? Because it only benefits the criminals and creates a black market, they're like, you freaking hippie. And so it's just an example. What it is this party line. And so people don't know how to think about principles. They don't understand how to think about concepts. They only know how to think about what does my team say. And so they can be completely inconsistent. That's and right. They never realize it.
Yeah. But it's great to have a team because it doesn't require any brain power.
Right.
Right? You say, I'm a Democrat, so I vote this way. Well, how much thought does that take? It's like saying, I go to the ball game. I used to go to the Yankee games. I'm going to tell you how far back I go. When Mickey Mantle was playing, I sat in the bleachers. I used to get wood spikes in my behind because it was the old-fashioned bleachers of the old Yankee Stadium. And I'll be honest with you, if it wasn't for me, Mickey Mantle wouldn't have been half the player he was. I coached him in every game, But this is how far back I go, all right? I've got my point. Oh, no. Well, I was a Yankee fan, and, they can have the lousiest team in the world. Mm-hmm. Which is the best team in the world? The Yankees. Yeah. I mean, it's the same thing. If football, look at the football players. I mean, people who they don't even have a job, but they paint themselves and they beg, borrow, and steal to get tickets to a football game. Right. I mean, it's a mania. It makes no sense whatsoever. It doesn't require any thinking whatsoever, but they love to be in the 20-degree weather, sitting up in the bleachers somewhere with basically no clothes on, painting their body the same color as their team colors. And where's the logic? There is none, and there's no logic in any of this.
Exactly. And my wife says it's tribal. people are inherently tribal, and so they get into this impulse of just following a group because they don't have to think, just like what you said.
Yeah.
And you can apply this to pretty much most of the subjects that we talk about when you talk about an individual, political issue. So,
but do you also think it's a matter of people are afraid not to belong? Now we know people, even in the studio, right? The studio here, right?
Yeah.
Where, if you say, if the person says 1 + 1 = 3, right? Mm-hmm. And you say, wait, I won't mention any names. No. Here's a stick. That's one stick. Here's two sticks. That's 1 + 1 = 2. You understand that? Yes. Okay. All right. Now, 1 + 1 is what? 3. I mean, they do it all the time, and they drive me nuts. I go, well, how do you arrive at that? And then they go into the political thing, like, well, that's because the Democrats stand for this or the Republicans stand for, and all the logic goes out the window, and they just. It's like my baseball team is the best team in the world.
Right.
They're last place, best team in the world. It's just a mistake,
Mantras are a real problem. I'll pick on one issue, and that's abortion. And I'm not doing it because it's a left-right thing. It's just we're talking about mantras. Have you ever actually stopped and thought about what in the hell a pro-choice actually is, the right of pro-choice? Do we have a right to choice?
No, I don't understand that.
It doesn't make any sense.
You can't put I don't think you can put a definition on the definition of life. I'll be honest with you. I stay away from the abortion issue for
right. We don't have to go about the abortion issue.
I just want to explain
saying,
let me explain.
Okay. All right.
And the only reason why I do is because although I studied it, I truly don't understand it. If I don't understand it, I stay away from it. I just don't understand it.
Okay, well, let's take abortion aside. Let's separate that from the issue. I'm just talking about the mantra pro-choice.
Yeah.
That's all I'm talking about. We don't have to talk about abortion or anything like that. The point is, do you have a right to choice? No. Because it's all contingent on what you're choosing.
Oh, absolutely.
But they say, I'm pro-choice, I'm pro-choice. Well, what are you choosing? Well, abortion. Well, what are you essentially saying? I want to have an abortion because I want to have an abortion.
Yeah.
You're just repeating yourself. It's a tautological mantra.
Right.
Now, if we really had the right to choose or whatever, why didn't the founders go, we really should have that right to gun? No, let's just say right to choose. They'll get it. Yeah.
That's a good point.
We say these things, but we don't really think about what we're saying.
Right.
And that's part of this team mentality. If we actually sat down and broke down, like, for example, with the pro-life argument, the thing, what do you say when you say I'm pro-life? You believe in an inherent right of life, which goes back to the Constitution, which goes back to a bunch of concepts about inherent rights and whether or not we get rights from a government or whether we get rights from some other outside source or whether we have to defend our rights. It's a broad subject, but you can go somewhere with it. You say something like pro-choice, you're not really saying anything.
Right. Yeah, because you're not defining it.
Mm-hmm.
See, that's
exactly.
my problem is I can't define it. And I don't want to get into because
right.
I don't take a position on it because I truly don't understand. And I guess it's one of those things like when people ask me, do you believe in God? I said, I would if I can comprehend the concept of God.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not saying I'm anti-God. It's just that for me, I'm not smart enough. My brain doesn't work the way it's supposed to work, maybe, is that I cannot conjure up the concept of God.
Sure.
So I'm not anti-God. I mean, there probably is something out there, whatever it is, maybe.
Yeah.
The thing is that there's a lot of theories. There are Bibles. There are, there are all sorts of scriptures that go back thousands of years before, the Quran and before all these other books. And people have been trying to understand this for centuries. The best minds in the world have been trying to unravel this for centuries. And I'm not saying any of them are wrong. It's just that I am actually incapable. I'm downing myself. I'm incapable of comprehending
Sure,
that.
but the only reason you're able to say that is because you understand how to break down a thought. And my point is, these people don't know how to break down thoughts. That's why these people say, well, 1 + 1 is 3 or whatever, because it's not so much about the position. It's a mantra. It's something to repeat. So because that's what their team says. So, with the abortion thing, or going back to that, Ben Shapiro has a really good argument about it, but I think he gives the liberals a little too much credit. He says essentially what they're saying, if we're talking about rights in terms of what they're really getting at, is they're essentially saying the baby is property and therefore I have the right to do what I want, which is the same thing that the South used. But my contention would be they're not even thinking that deep. It's literally just repeating a statement.
Yeah,
and that's the problem.
Yeah, I don't think a baby's a property, by the way. But
right.
But again, I can't. I can never have that discussion because I don't know where I stand.
I know. I'm just using it as an example to show that people don't break down things the way they should, and the reason they don't know how to do that anymore is we've stopped teaching philosophy in education systems. We don't teach people how to think. The subject of how to think, there used to be entire books about it. How to take a thought, break it down, understand what your presuppositions are, understand, what's actually a part of the argument and what is just something that you're carrying with you from some other idea that's preventing you from thinking about the subject in a certain way. I mean, you learned how to break down a concept. We don't do that anymore. We just rely on our teams.
Well, isn't that a product of the fact that at one time we weren't taught by the government. We were taught by family.
Right.
If I go back a couple of 100 years, you go to a small town out west, and they have the bar, the general store, and then have the farms around there and a few other places. But at the end of town, you always found a little red schoolhouse. Mm-hmm. And when I was young, I could never understand when you see some of the really old cowboy films, old. I'm not talking about in the past 50 years. I mean, even before that. And they'd have let's say a episode where there was a shot done in a schoolhouse.
Yeah.
And you'd see a 5-year-old kid there, and you'd see a 15-year-old gawky tall kid that's 6'4", there. Mm-hmm. And for decades, I go, it doesn't make any sense. I mean, they have all these kids, everything from 6 years old to 15 years old in the same room, and it never made sense to me. Of course, they all had their guns because they went hunting afterwards. Really, seriously, they hung their guns up. Mm-hmm. And then it dawned on me one day, a few years ago. I said, Joe, where's your thought process? Of course they're all in the same room because the schools were not meant to indoctrinate people. Mm-hmm. The people at home who ran the farms and the blacksmith and whatever, they were tradesmen. They were laborers. They didn't know how to read or didn't know how to read well enough to teach anyone. They knew maybe very basic math, hardly. They can just about get by. They spoke English, but they couldn't diagram a sentence. They didn't know a verb from a noun, from a pronoun, or an adjective. And the people were interested in having their children educated, but only educated in the basics so they can build on those basics and then become either a welder, a farmer, maybe go to school out of town and become a doctor or whatever the case may be. And, of course, they all aspired to go to a college, which was near impossible at the time. And so what towns did is the town put out bids to see if they can get someone to come in and become a school teacher.
Yeah.
And they taught every kid, one classroom, regardless of, they didn't care what your grades were, how smart you were, but to teach them. Now, the reason why I mention that is that the people didn't learn their morals. They didn't learn the necessities of life, those things that you needed that made you a human being and not an animal.
Yeah.
They learned that from the family. Mm-hmm. Since the government took the schools over, who's teaching that now? The family can't do it because the mother is working, because, every woman should work, because, having a job in an office filing papers is a lot more important than raising children, by the way. Did you know that? You didn't know that, did you? Right?
Of course not.
Of course. Raising children, that's a slob's work. I file papers, for the government because I have a government job. So they relegated that to the government. So the government now really raises our children, and this is what we have. We have a dysfunctional society perpetrated by a dysfunctional school system, by a dysfunctional family.
Yeah.
Boy, we're batting 100, 3 for 3.
It's going to be great. It's going to be great. Well, let me give you an example of kind of what you're talking about. My grandma actually taught me this. She said, the big difference between the way they teach math now and the way they taught math 30, 40 years ago was, they would do a math equation, but then you would do something like a word problem, and you would say, okay, you've got to do this take example geometry. You got to figure out the radius and the diameter and stuff like that. And then they would take that math equation and they would go, okay, you've got a tree that's so thick, how many boards could you get out of it? And what they were doing was they were taking the concept and teaching you how to apply it.
Right.
What we do now is we just dates, numbers. We teach people to regurgitate information, which is why they're now just repeating mantras and not thinking about what they're saying.
It all comes full circle. We are the product of what we sow.
Right.
And what we've sown is a nation of, and I bet you've seen this on television, zombies, right? And you see, when I always thought that the zombie movies were monster movies, but I could never understand. I said, how come they all drag their right foot, and they bleeding on one side?
Yeah.
They're all doing the same thing. I go, but they're alive, but they're not alive. They're dead, but they're not dead. If they're dead, they eat people. What are they eating for? They're already dead. I mean, and then of all things, then you shoot them and you kill them, but they're already dead. I mean, never made any sense. And then it really was about 3 years ago. I was watching. I don't watch a zombie movie. I watch about 2 minutes. I never went for 2 minutes. Maybe a minute and a half. Maybe I stretch it that long, only because I'm watching it, trying to figure out what is it that I'm missing. And one day it hit me with like a ton of bricks, and I said, it's a metaphor. What they're saying, America, look what you have become.
Yeah.
You're a bunch of zombies. You go to zombie schools, right? You're being taught by... I have teachers in my family, and they're wonderful people. But they're zombies. You ask them any question, if they cannot recite it directly from page 43 in a book, they cannot think, every one of them. And I've had dozens of conversations with teachers, and either they cry, it's just asking them a question. I mean, I'm not debating. I ask them a question, and either they get angry or they start crying. Because they're zombies. Our teachers have become zombies because they're part of the system. They don't know it, and they're wonderful, dedicated people. They want to do well. And they don't realize that if you're a zombie, you can't do well. Because in order to do well, you have to break from the system. And they think the system is perfect.
Or they think the system can be made better if just the right people are put in place.
Yeah, and put the right amount of money in it, and all we have to do is give more money to the government and our schools will be better. That's zombie thinking.
And elect your team.
That's
and
right.
Things will magically be better.
That's right. And if you're a teacher, you vote Democrat. All that stuff. I'm of the persuasion right now that it's too late. I don't think it could be turned around. I mean, people say, "Oh, Joe, I'm a doomsdayer." Yeah, right. I'm a doomsdayer. I am. I'm a doomsdayer. We are doomed. I mean, look around you. What has to change? Literally, we have to clean out all of Washington, and we're talking about hundreds of thousands of people most of them making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, producing nothing but recarving the income of people, deriving income from people who are producing them and distributing among themselves to the detriment of the people that they're taking it from. It's like sucking the blood out of your system to make somebody else thrive, and it leaves you weaker. That's all they do. Every one of them. And then you get somebody like a Ron Paul who says, hey, we've got a problem, Houston. He runs for office. He's put on a stage. And I'll never forget this one time. He raised his hand. He said, after 35 minutes, he says, is anyone ever going to ask me a question? And they were so nasty to him. They asked him a question like, do you enjoy... this was not the question, but it was like, do you enjoy beating your wife type question, And of course, no matter how he answered, he was going to look bad. But then when they had the centerfold people, the two people in the middle, they say, well, do you think America can be great again? And they go on and they sound so, lofty and presidential and the whole bit. Who the hell would vote for Ron Paul? The guy can't even answer a question. This is what we do because we're zombies.
Yeah, absolutely.
Unfortunately, yeah.
And there's no ability to listen and break down what those politicians are actually saying. Because if we had the ability to break down what these politicians were saying, we'd realize they're saying nothing.
Yeah.
And they're just talking in circles.
Yeah.
But we don't know how to do that anymore.
I actually thought that with Donald Trump coming into office, I didn't vote for Donald Trump. I voted for the Libertarian. I knew he wasn't going to win, but I wanted to keep the Libertarian Party alive here in Oklahoma, and we needed to get so many votes, and we did. And we have a Libertarian Party once again, and I've been asked to run for office again, which I don't want to do. but no, it's very tough. I've done that. It's incredibly. It's not only difficult, but it's discouraging, because once you get in to run for office, you see the rot close up. Yeah. And it's difficult to take. You don't want to run for office, you want to run from office at that point, right? Yeah. But I didn't vote for Donald Trump, but I was rooting for him to win against Hillary Clinton, you know? Yeah. I keep on saying Hillary because
wasn't that election just like trying to decide which butt cheek you prefer? Yeah, it was just awful.
But you know, I knew I wasn't going to be totally pleased. I am really disappointed. This guy has turncoated on everything. I mean, my problem with Trump, he has no foundation from which he makes a decision. Now, if I said, listen, I believe that I'm king and everyone's a servant, you know where I stand. Now, I don't believe that, you know. But, I mean, if a person said that and said, if I'm in office, I'm going to be king, you're all serfs. Well, at least you know where the person said. You may not agree with it, but he's being honest with you, right? Trump says something. He has no idea what he's saying, doesn't know what the implications are, and then when it comes to applying it, he changes his mind, and then he gives a different reason. I have no idea where it... In fact, I know more of where Hillary Clinton, I should say, as General Salente says, Hillary Clinton stands, you know, than I do with his. Not that I agree with her. I disagree with her even more, you know, but at least I know where she stands. So I'm not sure which is worse at this point.
Well, I think... Ironically, Rush Limbaugh, kind of the king of the right, was the one that actually pointed that out. He said the thing about Trump that you have to understand before you're ever going to understand anything else about him is he's not an ideologue. He is not an ideologue. He says whatever he thinks is going to make him look good. And that's a step up from Hillary in the respect that she's part of some grander scheme to try to undermine the nation and get rid of the Constitution. They have these lofty plans, whereas Trump is reactionary. So you have an advantage of Trump in that respect, that he doesn't have any ulterior motives or any weird conspiracy, for lack of a better term. And so that's all right, but the problem is you never know what he's going to do from day to day, and he's going to make decisions that you really like, and he's going to make decisions that you really hate, and you just never know. But that might not be the worst thing for us at this point. You know, what bothers me, though, is you have this culture in the Republican Party, this team culture, that has completely reversed all their positions, instead of just saying, I don't agree with that, that's stupid. I would rather have a president that I can go, hey, look, you're an idiot right now, and then go, I love you, you crazy bastard, the next day. I would prefer something like that than going, well, now I've got to change my positions because this is what the team is. For a perfect example, you've got Trump, who's supposed to be this Republican, who's supposed to be reforming our spending, and he's wanting to spend $1 trillion on infrastructure. $1 trillion, after cutting taxes on top of that. Any Republican in their right mind 2 years ago would have absolutely lost their crap over that. Now it's perfectly fine.
You know, I got to tell you a little story that's right in line with that, and I want you to continue, but I'll forget if I don't do it now. But Milton Friedman visited, and he passed away about 8 years ago. He a big libertarian freedom writer, you know, and he went to China. And when people didn't go to China, this was in the 1990s, and he had to have a person with him, a guard with him, every place he went. And he wanted to see what was going on in the country. And they sent him to a construction site. And the guide said, here, this is what we are doing. We are building, China, be the new powerhouse of the world or whatever. And he noticed that everyone was using shovels, picks and shovels. And he knew that China had earth-moving equipment. And he looked, he said, but you have hundreds of people in the field with shovels. One motorized equipment can do this job more effectively in a fraction of the time, and it requires one operator. He said, why are you using pick and shovels? He said, this is the answer the guy said. He says, because it creates jobs. Now, this is what Milton Friedman said in response, which I thought was absolutely incredibly brilliant. He said, then why not give them spoons? Now, if you think about it, you got to think about that. If you have given spoons, you wouldn't have 100 people out in the field. You'd have 1,000 people in the field. You just increased employment tenfold by giving them spoons. Mm-hmm. Then there's no difference between giving them spoons and giving them shovels, rather than using the one tractor that can do this in a fraction of the time. Right? So my point being is that Trump keeps on talking about infrastructure. Well, his mentality is such that, geez, too bad I can't pray and have the Lord bring a tornado down and wipe out the entire East Coast, flatten the entire East Coast. Because just think of the trillions of dollars it'll require to rebuild the East Coast. And look how many jobs will be created. It doesn't make any sense. And what he says about infrastructure needs to maintain on a regular basis. And the only reason why we're looking for $1 trillion, which, by the way, would only be a fraction of what we need to bring it up to snuff. Right. Because right now, our infrastructure is an embarrassment to the Western world. Would you believe it? We're an embarrassment. We used to be the top. Now we're the bottom. Right? What we would need is that we would need so much money to do that. It's like giving everyone a spoon. It doesn't increase productivity. It just brings us back. And what happens when a person runs for office? They have a choice. They always have a choice between two items: building a new ball stadium or fixing the bridge. Now, fixing the bridge is like an ugly person, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, like if you want to date a girl, I say, I got this girl, she's ugly as sin, has warts on her face, you know, she's 200 pounds overweight, she's a real slob.
Yeah.
Or I have this infrastructure girlfriend of yours, and boy, you thought Pamela Anderson was nice? This girl blows her away. Which one are you going to vote for? You know?
Yeah.
So you always take the hot chick, and the hot chick is always the new ball game, which usually winds up costing the city millions of dollars a year in taxpayer revenue to support. It never pays for itself. Never has, never will. All right? But the infrastructure would have rebuilt the bridges and made roads better,
sure,
increased commerce, and there would have been a return on investment. But that has to be done every single day, not during election time.
Yeah.
So what happened is that the people at the lowest level of government, in city government, renege on their job. They fall down on their job. They get payola because they get the stadium, they get a cutback, they get free tickets, they get all this other stuff. What do you get when you repaint a bridge or reinforce a bridge? Nothing.
Yeah.
Right? So everyone's on the take who's in office, right? The result is then the president has to say, well, the town of Nashville or Santa Monica or whatever needs a new road, needs a new bridge, and we're going to give that money. Well, that means somebody here in Tulsa, Oklahoma is paying for that bridge. I'm sorry, I don't want to pay. We have bridges here that don't work, that actually have collapsed, and we're not fixing them. Yeah. We're waiting for the government. So I think the system is doomed because we cannot fix everything we should, and the people in office will only do those things that enrich their position in government at our expense. It's a real dark story, but unfortunately, folks, it's true.
I have a little bit of hope. I think,
well, that's great. I mean, it's wonderful. I mean, I'm not debating.
No, let me explain why. You know, I think my generation, the millennials, are screwed. I don't think there's any hope for them. But the generation under it, rumor has it, that they're actually more of the burn everything down types. And that's what needs to happen. If it's an institution, it's got to go. You know, I mean, yeah, we can restore to the original Constitution and stuff like that, but the institutions as they are have to be brought down before anything else can be fixed. You can't expect a system to fix itself, and we're to that point. It's not just a sick body that needs to heal. We need to start over. So I don't know. I think there are kids that actually have that idea, and I'm not advocating for guns in the streets or whatever, but just the understanding that there does need to be some kind of a clean sweep will take us a long way.
Yeah.
You know.
See, but you know, at my age, I look back at all the years and I say the probability of that happening is not zero, because nothing's zero, but it's, so close to zero. I mean, very close to zero. With you, it may be the 10% hope or 20% hope, whatever it is in your own mind. Me, I'm trying to eke out 1%. I'm still at a fraction of 1%.
Yeah.
And it's a shame. Now, I think I know when some of this will eventually clean itself out. Mm-hmm. And that is when we print that much more money, right, which is a bond. I mean, our money right now is debt.
Yeah.
It used to be worth its weight in gold because you can trade in $1 for a like amount of gold at the time, $35 an ounce,
right?
Whatever, $27 an ounce, whatever,
right.
Depending on what era you in. And so it was just a receipt. It's like a receipt for your clothing at the dry cleaner. You own a suit, the dry cleaning your suit. You have a ticket. It's your suit, and that's how the dollar used to be. Mm-hmm. There used to be gold in the vault. And they used to print money depending on how much gold they had in the vault. And if everyone showed up and put their dollars down, they'd all get a fraction of the gold. I mean, that's the way it's supposed to be.
Right.
Well, now, that's not the case. It's not even that case, okay? Our money is what? Our money is actually debt. It's not only not worth anything, it's negative because it's born out of debt. It's a Ponzi scheme. That's why they have confidence in your currency, because it's a con game. Confidence is a con game, all right? Now, what will happen is that at one point, when this happens, I don't know, and they will issue a bond, and no one will buy the debt. No one will buy the debt. They said, I had enough, or you're not worth it anymore. We're the world's powerhouse, and we don't have AAA bonds. We have AA bonds now. We've lost our status there too. There will be a point where there will be an alternative currency, whether it be cryptocurrency, special drawing rights from the IMF, or someplace. It won't be an individual one like the yuan, unless the yuan is totally backed by gold or partially backed by gold or silver or whatever, or something tangible,
mm-hmm.
And so when that day comes, everyone will rush to get rid of their bonds. When they get rid of their bonds, the currency will collapse. And when the currency collapses, the ball game is over and we'll have to start from scratch. But most people will starve. It's a very, very dark outcome.
Right.
But, I mean,
right.
How do you print trillions upon trillions? We are near, according to Lawrence Kutlikoff, one of the top economists in the world, in the top 25, says our unfunded debt, unfunded and funded debt, total debt, is close to $1 quadrillion. You couldn't sell the United States for that amount of money.
Yeah.
With its buildings and its people, you couldn't get that much money. That's how heavily in debt we are.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
So when it goes down,
really
that's when it will correct itself. But I think it's going to be very, very. There's going to be a riots in the street. There's riots in the street when they don't approve the minimum wage. They take to the streets. They burn stores.
Mm-hmm.
People who are just neighbors, they burn their stores down. You can imagine when all of a sudden the checks stop, or they get the check, but they can't cash it, or it's worthless.
I don't think there's any question that the thing's going to restart, that there's going to be a massive reshuffling, if you will. But how it reshuffles and where the chips fall is going to depend on whether we actually have a good future or not, in my opinion. And I think you've got a caller really quick. So
okay.
Let me
Call
turn
me.
that on really quick.
What phone? What's the area code?
918.
918 area code. Caller, you're on the air.
Well, I was just listening. I just...
You were just listening. Okay, I'm sorry. I thought you... Well, now that I have you on the phone, why don't you say something?
Sure.
Hello.
Hello.
What
Hello.
was your question?
Yeah, why don't you ask a question or make a comment? Just tell me what you think. I'd love to hear what you think.
Well, I mean, we've been AA for what, 3 or 4 years now? This is not a new thing.
Oh, no.
When they downgraded our status, correct?
Oh, yes, that's not new. Right. That occurred a few years ago. That is correct, Colin.
Right. And then Morgan Stanley and Credit Suisse, their relationship is circumspect. Credit Suisse is from Switzerland. You have to be a special type of person to have your money there.
Yeah, and they're bankrupt, by the way.
People don't investigate anymore. They have no clue.
That's right.
I'm in Tulsa, Oklahoma. We've had a number of police murders, if you will. But this happens quite often where I live. The elitism of the police force, the militarization of the police force. And then our politicians are elitist. How do we change that paradigm? What say you?
All right, how do we change the whole paradigm? Unfortunately, you have to really restart the whole system. As I said before, when people realize that the system...
like you were talking about.
Yeah, exactly. When people realize that the system they believe in, I'm talking about belief systems, not reality, what they believe in doesn't really exist, they will take to the street, there will be a reset, and hopefully that reset will be in the right direction and not the wrong direction. It's a very, very dark point of view. It's not nice, but we've gotten away with too long. We've gotten away with too much, too long. If you study history, you'll find we're on the same path as every other empire who has totally collapsed and gone in totally disarray. And we're no different.
I don't think
it's the fall of an empire. Who was written by? We're falling in with that. Spreading our resources too thin. We can't manage the whole world. What we're thinking. And then in France, when the government should be afraid of its people. I truly believe this.
Yeah.
Because if they're not afraid, they're going to walk all over us. And we have a flag that says, "Do not trample on me."
That's right. That's right.
What say you?
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I always sound so negative about the future. Unfortunately, I'm looking for something to hang my hat on, and I'm having difficulty doing that. I want to be a realist.
Well, what about Korea?
And what about Korea? What's your question?
North Korea, that is. How they said that a mighty strike is preemptive.
Oh, God.
They said that, an hour or two ago? You can correct me if I'm wrong.
Right. North Korea is China's problem.
I think Mighty Mouse, but,
North Korea is China's problem, not our problem. I mean, why don't we make the problem that we have with Mexico and the illegals, why don't we make that China's problem? Why doesn't China come in there, bring their troops in? It's how stupid it is. It's just stupid.
Mexico, I think you're a little misinformed. Most of the illegal Americans, or illegal immigrants, I should say, are from different countries that overstay their visas. 70-80% of the legal immigrants.
Oh no, you're right. I was only making
visas, and we know where these people are.
Yeah.
Why not just deport all of them?
Yeah, no,
because they're making money. Some of them are making 6-digit numbers, and this is true.
Yeah.
I turned one in that was making a little over $100,000. He was working for Southwestern Bell. He overstayed his visa. He happened to be Mexican, and he got deported.
Yeah. Well, when I made that comment, I was just being a smart face. By the way, I wasn't making I wasn't drawing a one-on-one comparison whatsoever. We should be in no country. We should be in no country other than the United States. And if someone wants to go to Korea because they think North Korea is bad and they want to fight them, I say go, but don't bring me with you. You want to go? I have a guest here in my studio. You want to go to Korea?
Go.
Go.
They mean a physical attack, or they mean a cyber attack, which they've done before.
It's not the first time they've threatened us.
It's all interconnected.
Yeah, it certainly is. Well, we're about. In fact, we're past due. We're about out of time. I want to thank you.
I enjoyed the dialogue. Thank you for having me on. I'm from Oklahoma.
All right, thank you so much for calling. Certainly appreciate you calling Liberty Talk Radio. And in fact, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. If you will send me an email to comments@libertytalkradio.com, I will send you a coffee cup with my picture on it.
Oh.
Okay. All right.
I could do that. I'll put whiskey in it.
All right. Thank you so much, dear. All right. Thank you for calling. All right.
That'd make you smile.
Appreciate it. Okay, Gary, you want to close it out?
Yeah. Hopefully it doesn't come to all that, blood in the streets and stuff. I think you're probably right, but I don't think it necessarily has to. I think the first step is not necessarily just informing people and getting them to regurgitate facts, but teaching people how to think and break down things again. And the first step to doing that is getting people out of this team mentality. I mean, we have a way to get out of this, I believe, but it's just going to take a lot of really reversing the propaganda that's been going on for the past several years. Now, it may be too late. You know, they're already starting to riot and stuff in Berkeley. But if we were to fix it, if there is a way to fix it, it's going to come with not just telling people facts, but teaching people how to think, how to break down thoughts so that they can interpret the facts for themselves and come to their own conclusions. There should never be anybody that's purely 100% Democrat or 100% Republican or 100% anything. You know, you should change your mind from time to time.
I like to be 100% freedom.
There you go.
Really, if you think that the situation in Syria needs attention, please take a flight out of your own money, buy a gun, a rifle, whatever you want, the grenade launcher, go over there and fight. Go, man, go. I don't care, but that's your business. Don't bring me into the argument. Don't make me pay for a military who thinks that they're going to go over there and be, you know, peaceful, but go over there and have someone's head blown off. No, I don't want to do that. If these politicians want to do it, I'd say, you want to solve the problems of the United States? Next time they vote for a conflict, the first guys, the front line should be all our politicians. That's how we'll solve all our problems.
We wouldn't have any politicians and they get shot in like 3 minutes.
Thank you. Okay, now we've just solved all our problems. Thank you very much, Gary, for being on Liberty Talk Radio, folks.
Me.
This is the end of today's broadcast. We'd like to thank our sponsors for the financial support, and we'd like to thank you for listening in. You can further the cause of liberty by recommending this program to your friends and let us hear from you. Our email address is comments@libertytalkradio.com. Remember, as my wife would say, you're either allowing your liberties to be taken away or you're striving to protect them. Unfortunately, there is no middle ground. Until next time, this is Joe Cristiano. You've been listening to Liberty Talk Radio. Stay well. Stay tuned.